An analysis of Benjamin Britten's Salley Gardens. I'm your analyst and host, Steve Ingrassia. Salley Gardens was published by Benjamin Britten in his Folk Songs, Volume 1, British Isles, in 1941, and it's written to a text by William Butler Yeats. Now, here's a photo of Benjamin Britten. I believe this was taken in 1968, so about 25 years after he published his folk songs. And here's a photograph of William Butler Yeats. He looks pretty young. I don't know exactly when this was taken, but he was very young when he first published the poem, so this might be about the right age for that. Now here's the etymology of the text by Yeats. He published The Wanderings of Oisin in 1889, and it included a short two-stanza poem entitled An Old Song Resung. In a reissue of The Wanderings of Oisin in 1895, the poem's renamed, and now it's called Down by the Salley Gardens. Now, Yeats himself described the poem as an attempt to reconstruct an old song from 3 lines imperfectly remembered by an old peasant woman in the village of Balassadari, Sligo, who often sings them to herself. Now, where did this old song resung come from? Although Yeats did not know it, there is indeed an old Irish folk song called You Rambling Boys of Pleasure. Now, this has 6 verses, versus Yeats's 2. Lines 1, 3, and 4 of verse 2 of You Rambling Boys of Pleasure were clearly used as source material for Down by the Salley Gardens, and you can see that right here. Down by yon flowery gardens, my love and I we first did meet. I took her in my arms, and to her I gave kisses sweet. She bade me take life easy, just as the leaves fall from yon tree. But I, being young and foolish with my own darling, did not agree. Verse 2 of Yeats's poem is more melancholy than You Rambling Boys of Pleasure, whose narrator becomes a rover who vows to bring his love presents if she should ever change her mind. Now, here is the text that was actually published by Yeats. Down by the Salley Gardens, my love and I did meet. She passed the Salley Gardens with little snow-white feet. She bid me take love easy as the leaves grow on the tree. But I, being young and foolish, with her would not agree. In a field by the river my love and I did stand, and on my leaning shoulder she laid her snow-white hand. She bid me take life easy, as the grass grows on the weirs, but I was young and foolish, and now am full of tears. Now there are 2 quatrains, that is, verses consisting of 4 lines. Here's the first one, here's the second one. Each quatrain comprises 4 rhyming couplets. Meet and feet, tree and agree, stand and hand, weirs and tears. The first lines of each verse place the lovers together in a specific location, the Salley Gardens, that is, Willow Gardens, and a field by the river. The second lines highlight the narrator's love and refer to a portion of her body as snow white. In the first verse, she has snow white feet, and in the second verse, a snow white hand. The third lines of each verse show the narrator's love, asking him to calm down, take it easy. And it uses a nature simile, as the leaves grow on the tree, as the grass grows on the weirs. And the fourth lines indicate the narrator's regret for being young and foolish, and his regret for something that might have been. Now, here's an etymology of the folk song tune. An old Irish fiddle tune called The Maids of Mourne Shore was collected by George Petrie in 1834 and published by Charles Stanford in 1902. Now, here's a reproduction of the 1834 Maids of Mourne Shore. Notice it doesn't have any words, and it's in the key of A. A good key for a fiddle. Herbert Hughes set Yeats' poem to the tune of Maids of Morn Shore in 1909. Notice he did this before Britten did. The accompaniment is a simple diatonic harmonization. Note, it's transposed into a more singable key. So this might be something that you could sing in your parlor, no matter whether you're a tenor, a baritone, a soprano, or an alto. It's in the key of D here instead of the A from the fiddle tune. Now, Britten adds a new piano accompaniment, but the same melody that Hughes used, and it's more nuanced than Hughes's treatment, and it transforms this folk song with its simple diatonic harmony into an art song. He publishes it in G-flat major to highlight the tenor range of his longtime companion, Peter Pears, who premiered the piece and who frequently sang it at recitals with Britten himself playing the piano. It's shown below in D-flat, as it was later published for medium voice, and that's the key in which I perform it, because I don't have the same range that Peter Pears does. Now here's a melodic analysis. The two verses are identical, and each sets one of Yeats's quatrains, which you recall are very symmetric. Each verse consists of 4 phrases in an AABA pattern. The A phrases are identical to each other and identical across verse 1 and verse 2. And the B phrase is contrasting, but identical in verse 1 and verse 2. The A phrases are pentatonic, with an octave range from Do to Do. Pentatonic, they use the 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, and 6th scale degree only. The B phrase adds the 7th scale degree, so it's no longer pentatonic. Its range is a major 9th. We're now going from Do to Re. There are no non-harmonic notes in the melody, and no accidentals whatsoever in the melody. The style of the vocal line is legato throughout, and there are no melismas. Each syllable is set to either 1 or 2 pitches. The only exception is the word field in line 1 of verse 2, and that only has 3 pitches. So a simple folk song type setting of the melody. Now here's a dynamic analysis. Verse 1 starts quietly. It's piano for the first 2 phrases. In the 3rd phrase, there's a subito più forte as the narrator relates his love's directive to take love easy. There's a crescendo at the end of this phrase, so On the Tree is the loudest part of the first verse. And the final phrase decrescendos to triple piano, highlighting the melancholy felt by the narrator as he laments his disagreement with his love's wishes. Verse 2 begins loudly, as opposed to the soft beginning of verse 1, so the listener might believe that perhaps the narrator has become wiser by this time and come to a happy understanding with his love. The 3rd phrase again crescendos, so On the Weirs mirrors the first verse's On the Tree as the loudest part of the verse. And there is once again a decrescendo in the final phrase, to again demonstrate the narrator's melancholy declaration that his foolishness caused him to ignore his love's preferences and leaves him full of tears. Now what about the piano accompaniment? There's a constant 8th note pattern, which doesn't stop until the very final chord. This both unifies the composition and gives the song some energy and forward momentum. Now there are expressive directives, flowing, sempre sostenuto, smooth, and espressivo, all within the first measure, that indicate even though the 8th note motif provides movement and energy, the overall tone will be subtle. The smooth, constant rhythm evokes a gentle feeling of movement. To me, that evokes a feeling such as the river that's described in the text. Now there's a 4-bar introduction before the vocalist enters, with the 8th notes in the right hand and short melodic phrases in the left hand. There are short crescendos and decrescendos in this piano accompaniment, each within the space of a measure or less, and it provides a dynamism that doesn't allow the 8th note motif to sound static. The left hand phrases introduce non-harmonic pitches. Remember, we didn't have any of those in the vocal line, such as the lowered 7th and lowered 6th scale degrees that aren't present in the vocal line, and they give the music a mysterious color. The 4-bar piano phrase that is used in the intro appears between the two vocal verses, and again with a 1-bar extension to end the piece. In the first verse, the piano part is very thinly scored, generally with only 2-note chords for the 8th notes in the right hand, and it remains pitched at or below the vocal line, and the left line outlines chords with a simple arpeggiated quarter note pattern. In the second verse, the piano adds an upper octave to the right-hand 8th notes and uses 3- and 4-note chords, returning to the 2-note chords only for the final phrase, and the left-hand arpeggios are doubled at the lower octave. In conjunction with the louder dynamic level of the second verse, the denser texture and the expanded range of the accompaniment adds tension, and it indicates to me a high emotional content. In the final phrase, where the narrator tells us he is full of tears, the accompaniment returns to the quieter, sparser style of the first verse. Now, what about the harmonies? They're generally straightforward, with frequent, authentic cadences. There are no extended modulations in the piece, but the inclusion of a flatted chord accompanying the word foolish in each of the verses suggests a momentary major second downward modulation in the right hand, but the left hand continues to arpeggiate the original tonic chord, so we don't really modulate, we just suggest it. Graham Johnson cites this harmony as Schubert-esque, and Lennox Berkeley refers to the same chord as an example of daring simplicity offset by the exquisite modulation of the 18th bar. Now, what conclusions can we draw? Benjamin Britten pairs a folk song tradition with a literary masterpiece in the Salley Gardens. Yeats's text is a poetic tour de force based on what he claimed was a song snippet, but which he transformed into a classical structure. The text exhibits symmetry and an emotional journey, and has an overall air of sadness and regret at one's inability to treat love properly while young and foolish. Britten takes the text, which had been set to the tune of a completely unrelated Irish folk song, and adds an exquisite piano accompaniment. Like Yeats's text, Britten's composition is simple, yet brilliant, and it's highly symmetrical. There's a subtle interplay of the text, melody, harmony, and the style musically displays the full range of emotions that Yeats implied. Now, the analysis of this tune is largely my own, but here are some references I used to help trace the text and the folk songs from their origins, and to get some commentary from some music critics and some contemporaries of Benjamin Britten. I hope you enjoy Benjamin Britten's The Salley Gardens.